February 2nd. Here to give you a couple of logistics before we get started with our webinar tonight. As I said, as you're joining, feel free to introduce yourself via the chat. We will save Q&A for the end of the webinar, and you can submit those questions via the Zoom Q&A. And if you missed any content or you want to share it with anybody else interested in web accessibility, we will be recording and posting this webinar to our YouTube channel, which I'll also provide a link for towards the end of the webinar. That being said, a warm Women Who Code introduction. Whether or not this is your first webinar with us or you've been on a number of webinars, our mission is to inspire women to excel in their technology careers. And we envision a world where women are represented as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. Just to remind you this evening or this morning, if you're joining us from everywhere all over the world, Women Who Code is an inclusive community dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates or supports this community, regardless of gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, and as we like to joke, preferred programming languages. Everyone is welcome, so thank you for being here. That being said, this webinar tonight and all of our events are, again, to inspire women to excel in those technology careers, so we do not tolerate any harassment of any members in any form, and this applies to all of our events. That being said, welcome, whether or not you're a beginning engineer or you're an engineer with many years of experience, or you're just interested in getting started with web accessibility. Our target audience are engineers with 2 or more years of experience looking to support and resources that strengthen their careers. Our goal is to help you guys level up your careers. And, you know, in the long year that we have all had and moving into 2021, our movement and our commitment to all of you is that as the world changes, we are a connecting force and we can create a sense of belonging while the whole world has been asked to isolate. Some updated statistics. We have over 250,000 members around the world. We hit 250,000 at the end of this past year. Very exciting. And we have 70 networks in over 20 countries and members in 120 plus countries. We put on over 2,000 events annually. And part of also that digital transformation with COVID, all of our events have gone online. And we also do offer conference tickets and scholarships, and ultimately here to provide access to jobs and resources. If you're interested in applying to a new job, check out our job board, and also encourage you to connect with other women or men here tonight. That being said, tonight you are here with our Women Who Code front end track. Needless to say, there are 5 other tracks also that provide tech talks, workshops, tutorials, trainings, technical study, project groups, you name it, fireside chats, lightning talk, panels, multi-series webinars, as we're here tonight to kick off our first of the 3 series, and also provide latest coding resources. You can see any of us on mainly Slack is how we communicate. But if you're interested in any other areas of technology, it doesn't just stop with Women Who Code front end. We have data science, mobile, blockchain, Python, and cloud. So feel free to check those out at womenwhocode.com/digital. And if you're interested in getting involved, whether or not that's speaking with us, like Amy's about to do tonight, or volunteering with us, we have great volunteer teams across all of the different tracks. You can reach out to me directly at mkcomer@womenwhocode.com, or more generally at fellows@womenwhocode.com, or at any of the specific tracks if you're interested in getting involved. And another plug, if you're interested in sponsoring with us, we sponsor with companies all over the world to put on different events and also promote different job resources. If you're trying to hire more women in tech, feel free to partner with us, and you can reach out to our partnerships team at womenwhocode.com. Final plug before we move on to the webinar tonight. A couple of things to put on your radar for upcoming events in 2021. We have our multi-series event that will continue next Tuesday and February 2nd, the following Tuesday. And we've also, one of our strong volunteers, Cecilia, is working on front-end Fridays and study groups at 2 p.m. Eastern time every Friday. And you can see each of them is geared towards a specific topic. So this upcoming Friday will be about front end and quality and DevOps, as well as the following Friday will be about CS fundamentals. So feel free to join any of those events. And I recently just also, through another Connect, booked a speaker for February 5th, Building Mental Health Resources in Tech. I encourage you to check that out. I know it's been a long year for everyone, so feel free to join us there as well. And finally, front end full disclosure is an AMA session that my volunteer team and I started, and it's a great resource if you just have any questions regarding tech or development, or just looking to network with other women. That will be in mid-February, so be on the lookout for that on our calendar as well. And with that, I am happy to pass the torch on to Amy. Amy, thank you so much for being here tonight. We are so excited to have you and share how to get started with web accessibility.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video first so I can share my screen without distraction here. Okay. Is everybody seeing this level up with accessibility 2021?
Yes, looks good on my end.
Right. So this is just an introduction to ease you into accessibility. We're not going to get into any tech specs tonight. This is meant for anyone who is wanting to take that journey into web accessibility, and it requires really no pre-knowledge of it beforehand. And for those of you who know more about web accessibility, bear with me as we go through these different stages and series. So as MK introduced me, I'm the founder of Digilou. I'm an accessibility specialist. Officially, I'm certified by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It's Certified Professional in Web Accessibility. It's just an exam you take after a little bit of studying, and you pass a couple of exams actually. So that just gives me a little more, I suppose, credibility, but the practice is actually what makes you know more about accessibility. So don't feel like you can't be an accessibility specialist yourself just because you don't have any certification. I'm also a World Wide Web Consortium invited expert for the Accessible Platforms Architectures Working Group, as well as liaison to the CSS Working Group. And for those of you who don't know, World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, is the group that is writing all of these specs for the front end code that you're writing. So all of the specifications for HTML, CSS, they're giving all those details to you and the documentation to you. And a lot of working groups put a lot of time into it on weekly meetings to improve specifications, to add new features. And so it's something to definitely look into if you haven't, not just for the documentation, but W3C wants to hear your voice. So a lot of times when they are publishing new specifications, they want to hear from people and from designers and developers to see how these different features are going to be used and if it's something out of necessity. And the APA, what they do specifically is talk about the accessibility and any kind of barriers that may come up for these specifications. So it's really fun to be a part of those conversations, get to know people, just meet the people who are actually a part of this. I'm also a web designer and developer. I've been doing that for about 8 years now. Design is definitely more of my love. I love the front end the best. Back end pretty much drives me crazy, so I find people to help me out with that. And I've also been disabled all my life, so I bring that perspective to this. I was born with a visual impairment, and so I'm hoping to share some of that world with you today from my personal perspective, and not just the wide range and ether of people who have disabilities. So for accessibility, who are we talking about exactly? We're talking about people with disabilities. This can range from visual disabilities, auditory, cognitive, physical, neurological, speech. I list off a few different examples of what those disabilities might mean, whether a visual one is somebody's blind or deafblind, low vision. We can't forget color blindness. is a disability in and of itself, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about that unless you have to encounter barriers yourself as a person who is colorblind. Auditory, having to do with hearing, cognitive of just processing and how you receive information. Physical involves mobility, what you're able to do with your body and what you can't do, or what you're unable to do because of what the design that's put in front of you doesn't enable you to do. Neurological, and speech is non-vocal. Neurological, of course, deals with more like autism. Cerebral palsy actually spans across neurological and physical. And that's the thing with disabilities, is we can't easily just pin a label on something and say this is what it is and this is what their needs are. As one of my friends like to say, that you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Everybody has slight differences, different needs, different kinds of barriers that they encounter that might not be one barrier to one person with ADHD, but it's a barrier to another person with ADHD. So it's really hard to necessarily think about all of the types of disabilities. Some people have multiple disabilities, and trying to think of what those needs are and how to prevent from creating those barriers on the web and in a digital environment. So the main point I'm trying to drive home here is that accessibility is about people with disabilities. It's not just a usability issue. It's a specific group of people, but they are people. They have services that they need to get to online, that or they've been forced to into getting online, or they have interests that are online that they want to learn more about. And so we are targeting that today, of how we can help people with disabilities access things on the web. So going further, what is accessibility? Oh, and before I go on to that, speaking of people, MK, this is the part where I'd like to go ahead and run those polls real quick for people. And so the first two questions are me just trying to get a sense of where you're at personally. What kind of environment are you working in? Or when you want to go to the internet, what are you seeing? And how different that is from other people around. Because everybody accesses the internet differently. We're going to talk a little more about that later. And also I'm interested to know what your guess a percentage for the US population that has a disability. And I'll give that a minute, just to give us a little perspective. And it's looking like a lot of people are making a subject, and I'm picking on the US only, not just because I'm from the US myself. I'm up here in Alaska, but it's really hard to compare data across countries because everyone is gathering information about people in their country differently. So how a disability is defined in one country might vary. So, you might run across statistics for the worldwide disabilities, and it could say 10%, but that really varies on how disability is defined. Most people here are guessing around 10%. The US actually has 1 out of 4 people, so 25% of the US has reported a disability. And I want to emphasize reported because some of us really just don't report it. A lot of times when I'm in different situations, whether it's work or whether it's when I used to go to school, it's just not something that I thought was important to report, because a lot of times I can navigate my way myself without someone else's help necessarily. And if I really, really need the help, then I bring it up then. But nobody is obligated to report a disability. So keep in mind that that 25% is actually probably lower than what really is. And when we go back to think about what kinds of disabilities they are, there's such a wide range that maybe in your mind, you're thinking that a person with a disability is somebody who uses a wheelchair, or a person with a disability is somebody who uses a cane, that they're blind. So it's so much more than that. And there's so many hidden disabilities and people who are passing that we're not even fully comprehending struggles that people are going through internally, even when they access things on the web. So going back to what is accessibility? Well, accessibility for us in our terms is making websites and apps work well for people with disabilities. It helps people perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web. It's not a checklist. It's not a standard that's been published. It's not a set of laws. All of these things are helpful to help us understand the technicalities of how to make a website and what we're aiming for, but it's not those things. It's us making sites accessible. And on that, talking about disability, I want to bring up the social model for disability. So many times people are still stuck in thinking of disability as a medical model of there is something wrong with my eyes. And so I have a disability because I am visually impaired. But in reality, what people with disabilities are encountering is a mismatch between them and the design. And so that's why giving this talk today, I feel like we have such an important role as web designers and developers that we can change that design. We can make that design match for more people to be included on accessing the web. So if you can think that way of inclusion, I know it feels like such a hot topic now on so many fields, but accessibility is definitely a part of that inclusion and equity. And so we want to work on our design to match a person and where they are coming from. Okay, so when is the time that we should be making things accessible? Today, if you learn something, just one thing out of this talk to help make your designs or your website or mobile app or whatever more accessible, today is the day to do it, to start practicing that. And it takes just small steps, and nobody is going to learn everything in just 1 hour. But the more you keep learning, you can keep adding that on every day and make that a part of your practice. So don't wait until you've gone to all 3 of my sessions. Start, I would even say, for tomorrow, for those of you who it's late and you're going to go to bed after this. Okay, so where does accessibility take place? And of course, we know it's going to take place. Our websites will be accessible. But where in the process is accessibility going to take place? Well, it's not going to be just on the front end development. You want to start accessibility in your conversations for planning. You want to see accessibility principles applied to design mockups before they're even passed off to somebody. And then you want back end and front end both to be paying attention to accessibility and have some kind of base knowledge to understand challenges that people with disabilities have when they come to the web. Natural thinking would say, well, maybe there's testing you can do for accessibility. And yes, you do want to do it at that point, quality assurance. And then post-production. It's never just when it's done and you go on. The best practice is when it's been launched. And I suppose if you're doing an agile development anyhow, you're going to want user feedback, and you're going to want to include people with disabilities in that feedback that you get. So accessibility should be a part of your process all throughout. Everybody should be responsible. It's not just on the shoulders of the front end developer. So going on to why accessibility, there's many reasons that you want accessibility. It's essential for some and then useful for the rest of us. So why not? You're helping the people who need it the most, and then you're benefiting everyone else. It's also the right thing to do. Just knowing it, that goes a lot hand in hand with it being essential for some and useful for all. It's good for your business. You can't argue with that point. And as a front-end developer, maybe, that's not necessarily your call, but it's a good thing to mention when it comes to people start crunching numbers and they're saying, well, accessibility is going to cost us too much. And then you say, well, but don't you want more people to come to your site? Think of that 25% or more people who might be passing through your site, and you want to be inclusive of that. And that means more interaction with the business. So it's always good for business. And then if you really have to prove why for accessibility, which I always hold this off to last because I don't like to push the whole law thing, but in many countries, their accessibility is law. So the US has, for things that are federal related, you have Section 508. A lot of the cases that have actually passed through court and hit websites have been spurred on by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which doesn't specifically say that websites have to be accessible, but the spirit of that law, making sure that environments are equally accessible, has been applied to that. So your site is not above the law. And so if you really have to encourage your organization, say, well, we need to look at the laws too, so we're not breaking the law, or we get hit up with a lawsuit, which is going to be way more costly than the actual effort and money putting into making your site accessible. Something I wanted to touch on too at this point, while I'm mentioning that very first point of essential for some and useful for all, is I want to just give an idea of what some of the assistive technologies are that people are using and how things can be inaccessible or accessible for people. There's just too many assistive technologies and adaptive strategies that people use. So I can't go through all of those tonight, but I definitely want to do a few and kind of break you in with experiences I've had and even strategies that I use as somebody who has lower vision. So the first, I'm going to go ahead and unify this. Okay, so to pick on women who code in your site while we're all here, I'm going to first show off what a screen reader does. So screen readers is a text-to-speech software. And for those not familiar, it usually is mainly reading things off of the website aloud. So things need to be in some kind of machine way, which is usually text. And it allows people who either are blind, that it reads that off to them, people with low vision that just have a hard time seeing it. Screen readers, which the one I'm going to show isn't for that particular audience. It's mostly for people with who are blind or low vision. But there's another type of screen reader that allows people who have dyslexia or processing issues where it's easier to process information by hearing it rather than seeing it, then they can read along and hear it at the same time. So screen readers aren't just for blind people. Screen readers can also have the extension of having an external peripheral device where it's called a refreshable braille display, and it'll take that text that it's reading and these pens in this, it's kind of like a long board, and it has these dynamic pens all across. And the pens kind of come up and somebody can read with their fingers what text is being read through the screen reader. So, and I don't have a refreshable braille display to show off, but just to let you hear, I'm going to turn on, this is a free screen reader that works on Windows. It works best with Firefox. And I hear that it's working really well with Chrome too, for all you Chrome users who voted on Chrome today. So let me see if you can hear it.
Women Who Code.
And so a lot of times, the first thing that the screen reader does when it comes to a website is it'll read the title of the page. So when you are giving that title element, it picks that right out and parses it and reads off what you did. And so a lot of the ways that people with screen readers will navigate, mostly, some can use a mouse, but say if you're blind, you're going to be using the keyboard. And so you can just tab around.
Remote meeting, stop share.
So
Home
that's
women,
still here.
navigation landmark list with 7 items, clickable networks menu button sub-menu.
And so that read off first thing. I headed in. It says that this is a navigation. It reads off that role. And so somebody who coded this must have used either role equals navigation, which is an ARIA attribute, or maybe they used the HTML element nav. So it's good that I know it's there. If this was put in list format, say with the UL and the LI elements, then it'll be able to tell me this is a list. This has X amount of items.
About link. For companies link.
And so it reads the text, which is important. So when you give it clear text of where it's going and it tells you that it's a link.
Blog visited link. Clickable job board menu, donate link. Clickable sign in link. Sign up link. Join us button link.
So the cool thing about screen readers too is somebody who is using a screen reader, especially someone who is blind, and probably even low vision too, because it gets pretty rough to pan around when you're enlarging things, is they have all kinds of shortcut keys that are built into this. So the H key, for instance, with NVDA,
Member benefits heading level 1.
is I can hit that and it'll go through that list. Another thing, and let me see if I can bring this up here so you can actually see it for those who need to see.
Elements list dialog. Elements list. Elements list.
And so they have kind of like a listing function that you can bring up too. So whether they want to quickly get to somewhere, because a lot of times their skimming of a page is going to be different than maybe how you skim it. You might kind of quickly scroll down a page to get an idea what's going on. They can bring up this menu and they can look over what links are here. So if you've coded these as anchor links, this is good. And this will be brought up in the list. But whatever text you used, it's good that those are all unique, so they can go through and quickly see what these are about. And hopefully all the sign up spots, if there's multiples in this list, will be able to go to the same spot. You don't want the same kind of text and
Volunteer.
they have a different location that they go to.
Heading.
Headings has its own shortcut key.
Radio button pressed not checked Alt plus A. Empowering with member.
And so this kind of shows the nesting that happens. So
leadership.
Hopefully if everything is in the appropriate hierarchy with your heading 1, your heading 2, your heading 3, and how those relate to each other, this gives them a good sense of the architecture and what how your content is organized on this page. NVDA also allows
radio button pressed not checked Alt plus
for you to look for the different form fields,
buttons, radio button,
buttons.
navigation.
There's the landmarks. Now it looks like only navigation is on here, so this is a little surprising because usually a standard page will have the different landmarks to get somewhere. So you need your navigation, usually a header. The main is really important because it lets them jump right down. So this navigation up here, I didn't see was too long, but it really helps if they can do that shortcut. I think NVDA is like the D key or something like that, that you just jump right down. So there's no way for me to quickly get down to the main content. Sometimes the footer, which is equivalent to the content info, which gives a little bit of information about contact information. I don't see that on there either. So this kind of limits how quickly I can see the page layout and what's on here.
Cancel. Home women who code personal Microsoft Edge window. Home with
So
it.
I'm going to get off of that because I could probably spend
Exit
all day
NVDA dialog.
trying to show
What
you
would
how
you
that
like to
works.
do? Combo.
Another thing that is used is high contrast mode, and I'm going to switch over to Edge because that is more like compatible, because high contrast mode in Windows is the only one of itself. Like Mac has invert colors, but it's not the same. And as someone who has used high contrast mode personally off and on, inverse colors is yucky to me. It doesn't do the same thing. But I want to show you for people who are on Windows and use high contrast mode, what that would look like. And so, and just for if you want to try this yourself, it's the left shift, the left alt, and print screen for my Windows users out there, and you'll get a little dialogue. You just say, yeah. And so what I have my personal settings, high contrast mode basically comes in different color customizations. I prefer the black background and the yellow text because that helps me see things better. But this can be a shocker to people, especially who are design oriented, of you work so hard towards a design and you want it to look a certain way. And the layout will be the same. But something we all need to think about as designers and developers is that people need to be able to have your content as flexible as possible. So think about how you like it. If you're accessing websites on your phone and you want things to be responsive, I can still remember when before responsive was a thing and you try to look at this little tiny web page on your phone, and now that everything's responsive, things are bigger, they're easier to read, they flow in one column. It's so nice. And think about giving that ability and extending that to people who need to do high contrast mode, because I tend to have a light sensitivity that goes along with mine. So this was kind of like pre-dark mode for me. And you want things in high contrast mode to be perceivable. And so what I normally would have to is usually I'm a little bit bigger here. So I'd say 120% is usually how I function. And so this starts going responsive here, and you can see the navigation kind of went away. But I'm looking, and if I came on this and I needed 125%, I'm on high contrast mode because I'm getting headaches. I need to go to this darker mode here for myself to read up on whatever. And I don't see where the navigation is at. I'm looking around and I see the sign up. Okay. Where'd the navigation go? I'm not seeing it. I'm guessing it's here because my mouse changes, but there's nothing to see here. So those are things just to think about when people are coming to. So to me, the navigation almost becomes inaccessible because I know where it's at now because I've been to this site just in its in regular mode and not high contrast. And I know there's like a hamburger menu here. But if I was just coming to this site, I wouldn't know where it was at. And I would probably start tabbing around looking for it, say, where is this thing? But I'm not seeing an outline either of, okay, well, maybe they don't have that somewhere. I don't know what's going on. But a lot of times, like an outline of something would change color. So this is going from white to green here. And I've been on a few sites that high contrast mode, which is supposed to work well with Edge because they're both Windows system based and play well together. It becomes difficult if I don't see something, I can totally miss it. And then either walk away and say, well, I couldn't find it. Maybe they didn't have what I needed. Or I have to end up flipping between, which depending on if I'm headachy that day, I'm not going to go that easily back to the light mode. So I'm going to switch back out of that. There it is. So something else. Let's see. Okay, so and I've showed you a little bit about enlarging text and zooming in, which I often do. quite a bit, and responsive, that's good, because then it kind of works well for me and benefits me. And there are other ways that some people don't necessarily zoom in like this, but if they have the need to have text larger, they will specifically go into their settings and just enlarge text. And then it starts getting weird after that, because if somebody hasn't coded things up right or accounted for boxes in your layout to expand, then text starts flowing over because they decided to increase text, which is fine. They should have that right. But somebody wasn't planning for it on the design and development end. Other assistive technologies that I can't really show off, but I can briefly touch on, is switch access, which is people who might have mobility issues and they can't use a mouse, they can't use a keyboard. They can either use dictation, but if they can't speak well, then they need a switch, which is literally kind of like a button that they can press and it would act as a mouse click or let you navigate around the page. And it comes in different forms. It can be a button. It can also be kind of like a puff and sip with a straw. Other things are captions and transcripts. We don't necessarily think of those so much as just for a tiny group, because it benefits so many people. It's become fairly ubiquitous, but it does help. And it started out for people who were hard of hearing or deaf. So adding captions and transcripts is a big deal for accessibility. And again, voice control, some people who need to, they can't maybe use their hands for mouse and keyboard, they can do commands to their computer system wide. And so when they're navigating a web page, they can either pull up a list with numbering system that will get them to links, or if they see the name, I can then say that I want to sign in, or even find within the navigation what some of these are. Okay, so I will go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so we're getting closer to the end. We've gone through the who, what, when, where, why, and what about that how. You understand people with disabilities a little bit about who they are, what they're going through, and why accessibility is such a good idea, but what about that how? The first thing you can do to be able to start today or tomorrow is just start with easy wins. And that's something that my next talk is going to be about, of just getting that low hanging fruit. There's not a lot of time and effort put into it. It's just things that you have to be aware of, but things that have been common accessibility problems, and you could fix them easily and today, and apply that every time in your next project. So the second step, applying to your new projects. Continue to think in an accessible mind as you build. And from that point on, you can stop making things accessible. Continue to learn as best as you can, what time that you can put in. Again, it's just small things here and there. I've been doing accessibility for a little over 3 years, and it's amazing to look back at what I've learned, but I still feel like there's still so much to learn, because there's so many experiences out there, and how people are encountering barriers on the web. So there's still so much to learn, but just if you were able to learn coding, you can learn this, I promise you. And then fixing your mistakes. So as you have opportunity and you know better, you can go back and fix some of the things that you broke, the accessibility that you broke on prior projects. Even if it's as simple as, oh, I could have added some descriptive alt text, so I could have put something meaningful in that alt attribute for my image. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick activity with everyone. Oops. There we go. Okay, let me go back up here. All right, so the first activity that I'd like to do is, oh, and I want to share my other screen. Oops. Screen 2, there we go. Okay, so if you want to pull up a website, and we'll just take maybe 2 minutes to work through this. The simplest thing you can do to get started is to do the keyboard test. So as I was doing, and as I started doing around with the Women Who Code site, and that's just womenwhocode.com, I just start taking, I get myself in the window and I start tabbing around. And if I can see where the focus is at, that's a good thing to pay attention to, because imagine somebody who is sighted, they can see fine, but they have to use the keyboard for whatever reasons, whether it's dexterity or whatnot. Then as they tab around, they need to see where they're going. So looking for focus, paying attention to visual order. Is the tabbing and the focus going in the order that you would expect as you are looking around the page? What tabbing does is it basically gets to every interactive component on your page. So that's links and form inputs, and as well as, if you were using an image map. And as I'm going through the Women Who Code site, I'm first hitting navigation and just trying a few different things. So I've seen some of the color changes, which color as a focus indicator is not optimal, just because the contrast can be off. A person who is colorblind, depending on what how their color blindness is, might not necessarily see a strong change in color. So having some kind of indicator like an outline around there, taking away an outline is usually a bad practice, but having some kind of outline or having some kind of text decoration like underline. I've seen some people put cute little brackets around it as an alternative, but just something that you need to make sure that contrast is still good. So especially for people who are colorblind, and some kind of visual indicator that you are on this link to see. Other keyboard tasks that you can do is, so tab goes forward, shift tab goes backwards. Spacebar often can open up like selects or drop downs, but it's not necessarily that way. Sometimes spacebar will just take you down the page. So then you can shift spacebar, that takes you back up the page. Enter is kind of speaks for itself, but it should allow you to open. So for this networks drop down, I can enter and, oh, okay, there it is. Next, I'm expecting to use my arrow keys, but it's not doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and guess and say, well, tab works for it. And so that gets me to the next one. And I didn't find a way to, let's see. If I enter that, it'll close it back up. Escape. So if you're having like a modal or a dialog box that overlays on top of the page, the escape button should let somebody out of there, so they're not trapped inside of that box. It's just a preference. If you have, your little X for closing or your close button, those are helpful too, but the escape button, then natural working of it should be able to work also. So the next activity, if you've had a chance to be tabbing around, another easy testing method to see how your development is going is to zoom. And so as I showed earlier, I like to go into about 120% usually. I also have my system text bumped up, so sometimes I don't always need it quite that much. But I can see that indicator in Firefox right up here. But just to see how everything is working, another way is if you were even going to collapse it like you had a mobile. And sometimes for testing, we've gone up to 300 to 400% just to see if anything is breaking. And what you're looking for is, does any text disappear or get cut off? Are images and content, do they overlap? Like I start to see this WWCode that just starts to bump up again there on a greater scale, but it doesn't seem to disappear, but this does start to go off on much greater. That's it too, is do you start to see a bottom scroll bar appear? So do they have to pan horizontally? Because you're trying to prevent some horizontal scroll, just because then it starts to get hard for people to get to it. Are buttons, form fields, and other controls visible? Are they usable? And so you're just checking out your content and how everything is. Of course, a lot of this thing all goes down in a nice single column. And I'm not seeing anything that's cut off. And some of this bottom footer stuff even collapses a bit to make it easier. Okay, so takeaway. Let me pull this back up here. All right, so the takeaway that I'd like for you is to really think about, is accessibility benefits everyone. It's for people with disabilities and benefits them, but it really benefits anyone who's using devices with small screens. Just think about some of the websites you've encountered on your smartphone, if you have one, that has been really difficult to either use or read. And when things are made more accessible, say larger print, things are flowing, reflowing into one column, and just laid out well, and given enough white space and headings seem like they're prominent. It's just easier for you to use on your small device. Older people with changing abilities, say if their vision is starting to degrade, or their mobility or like hand movements are harder to control. People with temporary disabilities, that could be, say, if you had an accident, broke your arm, or something that eventually goes away. That can benefit if you're stuck to using your non-dominant hand versus your dominant hand. And how shaky that would kind of be. I know when I've tried using my mouse with my left hand, because I'm right-handed, it can be difficult, and larger target clickable areas are great. So it makes it easier to use. People with situational limitations, I always think of when I had a baby and how limiting that was of not only my attention span, my time to get in and get off the internet, how quiet things needed to be. So, having captions was good if I didn't have headphones. People with slow internet connections and limited bandwidth. Gosh, this really targets Alaska right here, because there's so much of that that we are not on par with a lot of the rest of the US, and especially larger cities. So when things are accessible, a lot of times they can be more performant because you are relying more on HTML. And it's in turn that performance either takes up less page weight or just loads faster for people. So Tim Berners-Lee, the person who basically invented the internet, was very adamant, is still adamant, that the web is for everyone. This was displayed in the stadium some time ago. This is the whole thing, and he is also the chair of the World Wide Web Consortium. His idea for the web was that everyone had that opportunity to share information, to access things, to connect. And so it's not just for people who are really committed, able to do a ton of things, but he wanted to make it accessible to all. Also, I encourage you to keep on learning. Again, it's not just an hour learning session. It's progressive, just like your code learning has been. This is just a part of that. And it's a very important part of front end. It makes you a better coder and a more empathetic person. To learn, there's some free training available. I know the Introduction to Web Accessibility course on edX through the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative. That's like a 4-week self-paced course, and it's really, really good. It doesn't depend on your technical level at all. And it goes more in depth about people with disabilities, accessibility challenges that they face, and just working towards making the web more accessible. Rutgers University Office of IT just put out some courses online since a lot of people are staying at home. They put it out for their faculty, but opened it up to the public. So I actually enrolled in that because they've got a lot of fascinating topics that I'd like to get better at, including the captioning that is coming up to be their next one here in about a week. ID 24, Inclusive Design 24 on YouTube. They've been doing talks for the last few years. It's usually once a year. I think one year they had it twice a year. And so those are a lot that you can kind of, if you're a person who likes to watch talks, they have a lot of those archived and discusses a whole lot of topics based on web accessibility. Other resources to look at, Nick Steenhout's Sound Bites. Nick Steenhout, who runs Accessibility Rules, A11Y Rules, he has a lot of sound bites that basically he interviews people with disabilities, and it's maybe 5 minutes long each interview, and he asks them all the same questions about what their disability is and what is their greatest challenge that they encounter on the internet. So if you're looking for more insight of what some of the real life challenges are for people with disabilities, I highly recommend Nick's Ally Rules Sound Bites. The W3CY site has all kinds of resources, whether you're into business planning, whether you're a designer or developer, they cover all of those things. I have my own blog, 100 Days of Accessibility, that I did a couple of years ago when I was working towards my certification. And it kind of goes through all the requirements of the things that I was learning to get certified, so you can get a broad view of what an accessibility specialist needs to know. Other resources, I hope by now you've heard of the Accessibility Project. They are a resource site in and of themselves, pointing you to people and other accessibility resources. And Ally Talks, Accessibility Talks by Carrie Fisher that she initiated a couple years ago, and again, interviews people, and their base conversation is about web accessibility. You can contact me anytime. You can mostly find me on Twitter at Click2Carney or LinkedIn.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. We can go ahead and get started for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, feel free to submit them in the Q&A or post them in the chat at this point. I'm happy to answer questions here. We do have 2 questions already in the Q&A that we can get started on. First and foremost, can all of these technologies be used with React? I want to use them for my portfolio website and any apps I want to deploy.
Yes, so assuming your question is, can you make your React stuff accessible? Then yes. I feel like Marcy Sutton has done a lot of work on that and talking how to make React accessible for the projects that you work on, even when it comes down to components that you have. So I would Google her name to see what kind of stuff that she's put out, either for free or paid courses.
Great, thank you. And the next question came in, is high contrast mode the same as dark mode?
No, high contrast mode is specifically, it's a system thing. Dark mode has become system-wide, but I think that dark mode has kind of a specific color palette going for it that I found helpful, and I use that more for my Mac as well as my Windows machines. And high contrast mode specifically targets a lot of things that you can manipulate that color palette, whether it be black on white or white on black, yellow on black. You can change up the colors of the way links look for you. And it goes across everything, every single thing that you have on your system. And so one perk or disadvantage of dark mode has been, you know, like, well, okay, Microsoft Office products. Since Windows does dark mode, you can have that default into those. And like my Outlook mail will then do the dark mode thing, and everything is that black background with white text. But then if I'm writing a Word document, it doesn't do that. I have white paper per se with black text. But when I do high contrast mode, it honors my settings, my choices exactly. So I still write yellow on black. It has some interesting results when I'm then trying to send it off to people and then colors didn't exactly go as planned. But yeah, it touches every single thing, and dark mode is still only crawling its way through things and has its kind of pre-designed settings.
Absolutely. Thanks for answering that question. Does anybody else have any questions at this time? Feel free to drop them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, or any other comments. Marielle just commented that she's excited to learn more about accessibility for the web and integrate that into her portfolio. Love the enthusiasm there. And just as a reminder, this is a multi-part series, so we will be here at the same time next Tuesday to continue the series. And if you're not sure if you signed up for the continuation of the series, I've just posted the link there, and you can sign up for the remaining 2 sessions as well. But before we close, does anybody have any other questions for Amy?
And
All
MK,
right.
I don't know if I can drop a PDF in Zoom or not. Is that possible if people are interested in the slides? I'm not sure where I'm going to post them yet. I know I put links in there and people might be curious how to get to those.
Absolutely. Probably the best way is for us to get all of the emails. Everyone who registered, we have your email, so we can send out the PDF or the slides via that probably tomorrow morning. How does that sound for everybody? And another question, Amy, do you have a Twitter or LinkedIn for any future accessibility questions? I believe it was on your slide deck, but we can.
I do, yes, yeah. Go ahead and
I could send that out in the email as well. We could send your like a contact card with the PDF. How does that sound?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, so everybody just be on the lookout for that. I'll send that out tomorrow morning, and I'll get those resources from Amy. Other than that, we look forward to joining next Tuesday at the same time. And a big thank you on behalf of Women Who Code and all the attendees here. Feel free to chat and say thank you to Amy for her time, and appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Everybody have a good rest of your evening or start of your day, wherever you are. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.